more appealing. It just makes it more different to the more of more wholesome.
More wholesome, yes. Yes. Not the cheap stuff. No. We do wholesome stuff around here. Doggone it. If it's not wholesome, don't put it in your mouth. That's why I ate dirt all the time. Did I just say that live?
You did.
Oh, joy. Oh. You guys are in for a treat, let me tell you. So, all right, good morning, everyone here. Good morning, everyone in cyberspace. I hope it's warm out there. It's cold in here. But today we're going to follow along with our, I just want to say Revive School reading plan, but it's not that anymore. It's the Redeeming Life reading plan.
Yeah.
So we have our own. We're growing up. This is so exciting. So, yeah, we are in the wonderful book of M-A-T-H-E-W, Matthew chapter 2. And this is actually going to feel really weird because, as we know in Matthew 2, this is Matthew's account of Jesus's birth. And today is January 2nd. It's like we're trying to preach a Christmas message like a week late, which is just, feels a little weird, a little strange. But believe it or not, I believe that the message that's in Matthew chapter 2 is something that is relevant for all times, for all seasons. And what's especially, I think, interesting for the exercise that we're going to do today. Is everything all right, dear?
Yeah, I'm just...
Okay, cool. Is that whenever you look, we've all seen an nativity scene, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What are things that you find in a nativity scene?
Jesus, Mary.
Joseph. Okay. Animals. Yeah. What else do you find in a nativity scene?
The manger, which is actually for the lamb.
Jesus.
Yeah. Yes, there's Jesus. Yeah, there's a manger. What else?
Magi.
Yeah. Let's see here.
Not there. Not at that time.
Well, let's see here. But what else do you find?
The shepherds.
What? There's shepherds too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The angels singing.
Angels singing. Yeah. So all of those things are things that you typically find in a nativity scene. But what's interesting about whatever you see those nativity scenes, it's a mixture of elements and ingredients that are borrowed from two stories of Jesus's birth. One out of the Gospel of Luke and the other out of the Gospel of Matthew. And while it's fair to say that whenever we're putting together a nativity scene, that all of those elements are there because they're all a part of the same story, they're not all a part of Matthew's story.
Mm-hmm.
They're not all a part of Luke's story. Where, and it's interesting to my mind, is that as they're putting these things together, they know who Jesus is, and there's Mary, and there's Joseph, and
the wise men.
And yes, but that Luke doesn't betray any awareness of knowledge of the Magi, and then Matthew doesn't betray any awareness of like the shepherds and the heavenly host. Where even though it's true that both of those things happened, that taking the trouble to record it is something that Matthew and Luke separately have to emphasize. It's critical to what it is that they want to tell about the significance of Jesus' birth. And so with Matthew chapter 2, what I want us to try doing is giving it a slow reading and pay attention to particular details that Matthew is leaving us so that we can get a clear idea about what's happening. And may I try, before we jump into the text, try and May I try proposing a lesson that I think is suitable to learn from this chapter from the beginning? Is that good?
Mhm.
Okay, cool. So, anyone who's been here for a while knows that I like to draw. I like to do illustrations, even if they aren't any good. So here we go. All right. There we go. No, I don't like that. There we go. Gotcha. There we go. So, okay. Okay. Oh dear, I'm losing it. You guys probably knew that already. Let's see here, and let's throw in a little bit of purple. There you go. That's the right color.
Oh, you got color.
Yeah. All right. And there we go. Okay. Excellent. Right there. So, all right. What does that look like to anybody?
The crown of glory.
All right, the crown of glory. Yes,
Of glory.
certainly one of them. So, but yeah, is this what? So yeah, it looks like a crown, kind of.
Mhm.
So okay, there we go. So, why am I drawing a crown here? I'm drawing a crown because
Probably was because Joseph and Mary and Jesus, the Lord automatically put a crown on them when the baby was very young.
I'm not sure I totally follow you there, but here's the reason why I'm drawing a crown. Let me try and explain what I mean. All right.
In this world that we're
Maria?
in now, in this world, okay.
It's okay. Hold on. Here's the reason why I want to draw this. All right. Thank you for your patience. All right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Please forgive me if I've been trying to think about how I want to try and explain this throughout the as I've been meditating over chapter 2, and it's been a little more difficult than what I might have hoped. But let me just try this. You know, it's Right. Lord help me. Okay. There's a lot of things that you can associate with a crown, a king who wears a king, or a king who wears a crown, a king who has authority, dominion, royalty, prestige, honor, the things that you associate with a person who's in charge.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of things that are, I would say, enticing to want to be a king. Wasn't there a Lion King song about that?
I just can't wait to
I
be
just
king.
can't wait to be king. Wasn't that a wonderful song? Everybody loves that song. But the fun, at least in that type of song, is this there's something about the king or being a king that is so enticing or attractive. And one of them has to do with power, or maybe with power, that you have some kind of control or authority to assert over somebody else. But the one thing that I think for a lot of us, that when we think about what is it so attractive about the prospect of being a king, is one of this. I'm going to see if I can spell this right. Soverei, sovereignty. I think I spelled that right.
No.
Sovereignty is that even if you are never a ruler over a country, a president, a mayor, that in some measure or a degree, you have an amount of space, a people, a project, a field of expertise where you have this space, this dominion that you are exercising some kind of sovereignty over. And what this attraction towards wanting to get something like sovereignty, this isn't any kind of formal designation, but I'm just going to call it King's, is it syndrome? Syndrome.
I think so.
King's syndrome. Mind you, I just made that up. But King's syndrome is the sort of thing where your obsession or your need to be able to have rule and exercise dominion over over this domain sort of takes center stage in your thoughts and your actions, to the point where your life is absorbed with your need to exercise sovereignty and dominion over a certain area. And let me try and explain what this means, or what this looks like. That King's syndrome is the sort of thing that that has its effect on virtually any all peoples, regardless of their culture or their upbringing or their economic status. Where King's syndrome is something that you can see that happens among wealthy stockbrokers who make it their habit to diversify and expand and strengthen their stock portfolios, because the more money it is that you have, it's not as if they need an X amount of money to live or to pass down, but it's just like the measure of their wealth expands the measure of their influence and their power and their security. So that they have this rapacious appetite for wealth, because it's like their grip on certain things, their sovereignty over their dominion, just gets stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. So that it's the pursuit of that just dominates their whole life. And believe it or not, the same thing, the same syndrome can be in effect with homeless people, as we've come to know, where it reminds me of it's a blues song by one of my favorite artists, Glenn Kaiser, who's got a song called Street Talk, and Glenn Kaiser, as you would know, comes from Japuza and Friendly Towers in Chicago, that works with homeless people all the time. Sings this song called Street Talk, and it talks about basically this a bum's or a hobo's love and satisfaction, and the way that he cherishes his cardboard box. And it goes, ain't always pretty, ain't always warm, ain't always dry, cold winter storm, ain't always sweet, ain't always fine, but it's familiar and it's all mine. Uh, but what he knows and what he's seen is that even for people who are homeless, they can be captivated by even just what little it is that they have and absorbed in having it because it's theirs. And they can't get away from it, because even if their dominion and their sovereignty is over nothing more than just a cardboard box, it's theirs and nobody can take it away from them. And that and that even when there's the prospect, and this is something that I learned from my dear mother-in-law, who has spent many years working with homeless people, who, when you offer them the prospect of something better, real shelter, food and drink, opportunities for job training and job placement, that will be hordes of homeless people who will come in and go out and would look at what's offered there and say, no, I would still rather sleep in the park. Why? Because at least there, I'm still in charge of my own life. I'm still sovereign. I would much rather be a king in a nowhere than rather be subject to somebody else and still live. And this even happens in this is one of the funniest places I think it happens, in one of my fields of academics, where let me explain. When I was finishing up my master's degree, there's and trying to prepare for going into doctoral studies, what they say in doctoral studies is that you have to find a subject matter that nobody has written on, so that you can become the master in that field, the go-to person, the authority in that particular subject. So even if it is a subject matter that is as obscure as mealworm diets in Papua New Guinea in the 16th century, that as long as you devote your energy and time to devoting that, and that's your subject of interest, you become the king over that subject matter, and you become the authority, the person who has the right and the standing to be able to tell everybody else to say, like, you think you know mealworm diets in Papua New Guinea in the 16th century, but hey, I did my doctoral dissertation on that. And so, stay in your lane, buddy. I know my mealworms. Thank you very much. But what's weird, though, is that what happens with academics when that happens, and they get that glorious PhD kind of thing, that they'll begin asserting their dominance over and their authority in fields that aren't their own, and they'll feign airs of authority to try and be more to go outside their jurisdiction, and to flout their authority, or to I don't know what the word is, to puff themselves up with their authority, to be dominant in fields that just they have no right to be in. And so that's one thing. Another place where this can happen, where especially for young mothers who have a house full of running around children that are just going crazy, and and that you can make it your life's goal, your the essence of your life, to be exercising dominion over that household, the dominion over your children. And to some degree, that's important to be able to recognize, to know that you have a responsibility of authority over your home. But if you make it your ultimate goal to be not just a queen over your household, but to be a despot, what's the term, a dictator over your home, the in effect, it's going to smother children, make them resentful and spiteful, to the point where they're going to, once they leave the nest and your nest is empty and you've got just a building to look after, your relationship is going to be broken with your family because you wanted your sovereignty over this thing. And frankly, even if we could talk about those in particulars, it still stands to reason that King syndrome is the sort of thing that all of us find so desirable and so enticing, because we love the prospect of being a people who are in control of our own lives. We love to sing our lungs out with John Bon Jovi. It's my life. It's now or never. You know that song. I'm not going to try and hit. I can't hit the decibels that he can do. But yeah, we just want to say that it is my life. That's where I want to be. And what we find here in Matthew chapter 2 is the story of a king who indeed was occupied himself with king syndrome, and does not handle very gracefully the news that there's another king. Mm-hmm. And so, and here's the sort of thing why this is so important, is that, frankly, however it is that you understand your sovereignty and your own diagnosis of king syndrome, if Jesus is who he really said he was, that he is indeed the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, and that if he's coming as a Messiah, he's coming as a deliverer, he comes in order to establish God's kingdom and reign on earth, that eventually your preoccupation with your sovereignty and your autonomy being, is going to have to yield to Jesus as king.
Amen.
It's going to have to. Mm-hmm. And what I find interesting in all of this is that in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 8, it's a fascinating passage because a lot of people find it hard to interpret, not least because this is one of the clearest moments where Paul is writing to a church and using biting sarcasm, which we find uncomfortable, but he does. And let's remember or reflect on what it is that he says. And he's saying this to Christians. Mm-hmm. And here, let's pull it up here. 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 8. It says, already you have all you want. Already you have become rich. You have become kings, and that without us. How I wish you really had become kings, so that we might be kings with you. So even the Corinthians, in some measure or another, even in response to receiving the good news of the gospel, are already preoccupied with this king syndrome. That the message of the gospel is useful insofar as it gives me a leg up over everybody else. And all of this to bear in mind, and mind you, this is not I'm not appealing for theocracy or trying to diminish our need for democracy. That's not what I'm talking about here. But what I am saying is that if we want, if there's ever any kind of possibility for the work of Jesus to be made manifest in our lives and in the world around us, God has to deal with this. There can't be a land of two kings. This is a story of one king. And here's where Matthew chapter 2 really does come into focus. Is that the way in which Jesus's arrival is described is done so in such a way as to take your worldly expectations of kingship and to turn them upside down. That's what he's doing here. And he's doing so in a way that's taking these, using geography of all things to try and demonstrate how it is that Jesus is the Messiah. But what he's in effect doing is basically, in other words, here's maybe this is the way to say it, that none of us will ever be able to recognize this as a reality in our own lives until our expectations and our understanding of kingship is dealt with. This has to be dealt with. And what Matthew is doing is saying, I'm going to undercut your understanding of who a king is, so that you can actually let go of those things that you depend on for your sovereignty, so that if you can learn to let go of those sorts of things, your hands and your heart and your eyes and your mind will finally be open to actually see Jesus for who he really is, as the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. So it's a process of unlearning before you actually have to learn, to be able to let this picture of what you understand as kingship and authority to be dissolving before your very eyes, so that the real king, you can actually see him for who he really is. This is the way Tolkien, a robust Catholic, but a sound theology that he wove into his into the Lord of the Rings, when he said, all that is gold does not glitter. Let's see here. Not all who wander are lost. The old that are strong do not wither. Deep roots are untouched by the frost. let's see here. How I have to remember this. Let's see here. Okay. A flame from the ashes shall be woken, a light from the shadows shall spring. Reforged shall be the blade that was broken, and the crownless again shall be king. Uh, if Matthew or if Tolkien is borrowing that kind of imagery and understanding, he's pulling it from Matthew chapter 2. So here's so let's read together and follow through with what Matthew has to say. And it says, chapter 2, verse 1, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, from the east Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star in the east and have come to worship him. So let's pause there for a second. In the first place, how many magi?
It doesn't specify.
It doesn't specify. So, so what were there? 3 wise men? Maybe. We don't know.
Probably even more.
It could have been. It could have been 3. It could have been 2. It could have been 1.5 if one of them was really short. Or it could have been a caravan of 50. We have no idea how many wise men there were. But yeah, 3. And so Magi from the east, which is really interesting because I'm gonna be a little geeky here. If actually, I think I'm always geeky. So that Magi. What we mean by Magi? Some translations will refer to astrologers or wise men. All of those are suitable interpretations of magos, which is the word that Matthew uses. But what's interesting about this is that in most Jewish and Christian literature, magi is really comes through in like it's a pejorative term. It's not something that you use as a way of honor or esteem or praise or reverence towards somebody else. Because, in effect, they're akin to, say, like in Exodus with Pharaoh, and he has this court of wise men who are also magicians, practitioners of the magic arts. Do you know who else is referred to as a magos in Acts? Simon the sorcerer. Now, I'm not saying that paganism, astrology, and witchcraft is here, but it's actually rather striking that Matthew, somebody like him, is actually I wouldn't say painting them in neutral colors, but actually rather positive colors, which on the whole, Jews and Christians, historically speaking, did not think of magi in glowing terms. They're rather hesitant to do so, and we can understand why. So, magi from the east, and what did they say? And they came to Jerusalem and asked, where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star in the east and have come to worship him. And let's continue. It says, verse 3, when King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. Why do you suppose they were disturbed?
They didn't want to rock the boat.
Oh. And with somebody like Herod, you definitely don't want to rock the boat. So let's think of this in these terms. Suppose you, Teresa, you and I took a trip to Washington, D.C. and we went to, the White House tour, and actually got a chance to meet Joe Biden. And suppose we walked up to Joe Biden and said, "Excuse me, sir, we're looking for the President of the United States. Could you please show us where he is? We know he's somewhere in here. This is the White House. He lives here. I mean, I know where his bathroom is. So I mean, like this, we are definitely in the White House. Can you show us where the president is?" How would Joe and his secret, or his team respond?
No, he's him.
Yeah, you're looking at him. Ta-da! So it's that, I wouldn't say that same type of confusion as to say, who is it that you're looking for, that it's not him. And what's so fascinating, like what you said with the causing turmoil, causing an uproar, causing a ruckus. Is it not true that the raid upon the White House in January 6th, almost a year ago now, last year, was based upon this type of issue, this contesting for the throne? Who is it that's really in charge, so that when somebody else rises up and there is an insurrection that poses a threat to whoever is really in charge? That it's that same type of tension, uneasiness, alarm that most of us, like as Westerners in democracy, like we haven't really felt until rather recently that this is something that would come along. But what's so fascinating about this is that it's not as if these magi are nobodies, and they've come all the way, probably from somewhere in Babylonia, to Jerusalem, and they're saying, "Where's the one who was born King of the Jews? We saw his star in the east, and we have come to pay homage to him." That you would pose a little bit of a question in this, is saying, so if you're looking for a king who was born and it's not Herod, who's the real king here? That in some way or another, their arrival, it kind of knocks a jewel out of Herod's crown, because his sovereignty is being threatened. And let's continue. And it says this: when he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Christ was to be born. "In Bethlehem, in Judea," they replied, "for this was what the prophet was written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will be the shepherd of my people Israel." Now, a fascinating quotation, not least because it says, "For this was what the prophet has written." Which prophet is he referring to?
The last one.
Micah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, from Micah 5:2. But Matthew, he doesn't mention here Micah by name, and many suggest that's in part because in quoting this, Matthew has woven two Old Testament passages together, one from Micah and one from 2 Samuel, also from chapter 5, verse 2, that refers to a ruler coming out of David who will shepherd his people, which by doing so, it's doing something to say, this sort of king who you've looked up to as being the authority that this king who's coming, who's been born, is not going to be like Herod, because he's going to shepherd his people. So in one stroke, in one prophecy, as it were, you can see the legitimacy of Herod's rule being diminished, falling apart, while at the same time being replaced and being substituted by a picture of who a real king is. As someone who's actually going to shepherd his people and not eat them alive, like a despot. And so let's continue, because we only have so much time here. And it says this. Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and make careful search for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother, Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and incense and of myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. Up till this point, everything seems pretty hunky-dory, where it's clear that the hand of God that is leading these magi to see the light of revelation of the King of the Jews is working, and they actually have found them. So there's evidence that basically how it is that God would have to call pagans from the outside to recognize what the Jews could not see from under their noses. So in other words, it's the sort of thing where, again, God, in his providence, if you're going to see Jesus as king, he has to turn your expectations upside down to show you that if this has to be the work of God, that you have to pry loose your idea of needing some king to tell you what to do all the time. But anyway, let's continue. It says this: when they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. "Get up," he said, "take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him." So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet: "Out of Egypt I called my son." It is, but even more than in addition to being a prophecy, because this is where, even just in this one chapter, 4 different prophecies, "so as it was fulfilled," is actually a fantastic exercise in understanding what a Christian understanding of what prophecy is, because it is predictions fulfilled, and indeed much more than that. That what Matthew is trying to demonstrate here, in technical terms, we referred to this 2 days ago, is one of, fancy word, typology, where if what somebody is doing is deliberately modeled off of a figure or a pattern in the past. It's like by doing this sort of thing in the same sort of way, you become a new type of that person. And so what you see, at least here, is one of these things, a typology of Israel, where by alluding out of Egypt, I called my son, which is an allusion to Hosea 11, chapter 11, verse 1. It's like he's wanting us to look at Jesus through the lens of saying, like, this is a new Israel. That Jesus is doing what Israel did, what the people of God did, so that if I could see the hand of God in rescuing his people out of Egypt, I can see the same God, the same hand of God at work in this person, Jesus Christ, who is calling his son out of Egypt into the promised land. It's like he's doing the same thing, so that Jesus is almost functioning as this Israel type. Now, that's not the only typology that's associated with Jesus, because there's going to be another one that's coming up in a few minutes, but we must keep going. It says, when Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. Then what was said through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because they are no more. Now, it seems to me that the reason for quoting Jeremiah in this instance is a way of demonstrating God's hand and his presence, even in the midst of such senseless evil. But here's at least one point that I want us to be able to try and make, is that for any of us who are diagnosed with King syndrome and we need our sovereignty, because that's the most precious thing that's important to us, oftentimes we will do what Herod did. Herod, so paranoid of espionage and assassination, that somebody was going to rise up and take him as king, that somebody will contest his authority, that he would do something like this. That when like Herod, if you're diagnosed with King syndrome, you're not just going to defend your sovereignty and your claims to your own sovereignty. You're going to do whatever it takes, even if it takes violence, to defend this thing that is in control of your life. And when you do that, it only brings destruction to everyone around you. Every time. Your preoccupation with your own sovereignty and King syndrome, it brings death. That you bring death, destruction, sorrow, and misery to everybody else around you. Because you're going to defend your own sovereignty at all costs, because this is the world to you. And without this, you're nothing. And I don't want anybody to deal with that. I don't want anybody to fall prey to King syndrome. And so let's continue. And it says this in verse 19. After Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who were trying to take the child's life are dead. This is almost, there's a lexical parallel with Exodus chapter 4, verse 19, that is too similar to be an accident, that parallels how Moses, he fled to Egypt, but then when those who were seeking his life were killed, that by doing so, even here, there's a typology of Israel and that of Moses. That Matthew's wanting us to see Jesus as not just a type of Israel, but also a type of Moses. A person rescued from the hands of an infanticidal maniac in order to achieve God's purposes as a new Moses. There it is. Let's finish here. It says, yes, so he got up and took the child and his mother and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning in Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Having been warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee. And he went and lived in a town called Nazareth. So was fulfilled what was said through the prophets, he will be called a Nazarene. Just out of curiosity, what is Matthew? What he says, so to fulfill what was said through the prophets. What is he referring to? Any guesses?
That it was being fulfilled.
It was being fulfilled.
What was spoken at that time is now happening.
But in other words, where in the Old Testament is there a mention of a prophet coming from Nazareth or Nazarene, being called a Nazarene?
Is it also in Isaiah as well?
No,
It's not?
there's no mention. Nazareth, as a town, has no mention in the Old Testament whatsoever. Yeah. And so, mind you, this, like so many of Matthew's prophecies, has prompted scores and volumes of discourses saying, what does he mean? Because one thing is for certain, Matthew knows his Old Testament. It's not as if there's something that he's referring to that he doesn't know about, or that because whether you're talking about the Old Testament or even in the Apocrypha, if you want to go that far, there's no mention of it whatsoever. And so I could propose to you, at least there's one, I think, plausible explanation, one plausible reason, or that this could be in reference to a netzer in Hebrew, which refers to a branch, or like a root from the stump of Jesse from Isaiah chapter 9, that it could be an allusion to that, in saying, if Nazareth is like this stump town, maybe we call it, or a branch town, that if he's coming from there, it's like, oh my goodness, look at how God had, by his hand, had maneuvered and protected and watched over. Also, netzer in its verb form is to watch over. That somehow God has been orchestrating things, even through the gifts of dreams, and moving moving the Messiah in order to fulfill God's plans in a way that couldn't be thwarted. That this is another way of speaking about Jesus as a Nazarene. But also, in short, is again this it also could be a shorthand way of saying that Nazareth, in the way that we like it's like a contemporary colloquialism to summarize what it is that so many of the prophets of old meant, and that is saying that the Messiah, when he comes, is going to come from the least place that you expected.
Mm-hmm.
And we get that attitude, do we not, from Nathaniel in the Gospel of John, where he replies to Philip and says, Nazareth, can anything good come out of there?
Mm-hmm.
Or even further in chapter 7 of John, where some of the, I believe the religious leaders are saying, like, but wait a minute, when the Messiah comes, we're not going to know where it is that he comes from. He's going to sort of pop out of nowhere, from the place it is that we at least expect it. That by calling him a Nazarene, it's like it captures the weight of surprise and expectation that defies human calculation, and sovereignty, that says, if there's ever going to be a king of the Jews, we did it by our own might. We did it by our own strength. We did it by our own calculations. We picked somebody who we wanted, and we all know how that goes. You asked for it, is what we say to that. But to say, to be calling him a Nazarene is a way of capturing the unexpected nature of God's provision of his Messiah to rescue his people, which, to be sure, there's something to be said from that angle, that the story of Matthew is indeed the story of Jesus. Jesus of Nazareth. That if this is where the Messiah comes from, it would have to be the hand of God in order to bring this to come to pass. But if it's true, then this is the most important thing in the world. So that, in sum, is the way that is the way in which Matthew, in these first few chapters, chapter 1 through chapter 4, is preparing us for conflicts that are to come, preparing us for understanding the nature of the arrival of the kingdom of God, and should, challenge us. Indeed, not only the only way that we think about our authority and we think about it ourselves, but because this is the way in which, remember when we said, like, if we went up to President Joe Biden and asked him, where's the president of the United States? Do you see how that could be taken kind of as an insult?
Mm-hmm.
Saying, like, who do you think you are?
Mm-hmm.
I'm the president of the United States. But that when we talk about Jesus as being king, as being Lord, at some point, if the gospel is to take root in our hearts, it has to offend us. To say, excuse me, who are you, Jesus, to say that you can be king over my life? Are you really the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords? That it has to undo, as it is doing before our very eyes in Matthew chapter 2, to has to offend before it can actually humble our proud hearts that say, we love to be our own kings and our own saviors and our own lords. and we will resist. We will fight to the death. We will even put other people's lives at stake before we ever submit to the authority of and the lordship of Jesus, who comes as a shepherd. And so what we needed more than anything is a king, and a king who is a shepherd. And in order for this to be more than just words on a page, or for Christian life to be more than just something that we do habitually, the gospel has to kill our selfish pride in order for anything good to come out of it. Because God is going to bring good out of it, even if our hearts are as small and pitiful and broken as a place like Nazareth. So let's pray and conclude. So, Heavenly Father, God, I thank you. It's beyond the feeble limitations of my calculations and my understanding and my wisdom that you would do this, that you would defy our expectations, that you would defy our petty and pitiful claims to being kings and lords over our own lives. God, that you would expose that for just how awful it really is, Lord, so that we can look to you, and truly become your people, Lord. Father, I thank you that even today, Lord, you call us by name, and Lord, I pray that we would do, Lord, as the 24 elders did in Revelation chapter 5, who lay their crowns before you and say, Lord, in a world full of kings and lords, you are indeed Lord over all. And so, Lord, we trust you, we love you, we praise you, and give you our lives today in Jesus' name. Amen.